Brooks was appointed chairman of Anglo-Irish Bank when it was nationalised. He told the Hard Shoulder here on News Talk about the atmosphere at the time of the financial crash.
There was certainly a feeling of desperation because, as I've said, liquidity and deposits were the main concern. But we knew there was more coming down the tracks. I have to say that, yes, there was a great deal of anger generally at the time.
Well-known criminal John Mangan is returning to prison after escaping last month. The gangster, who has drugs and firearms convictions, absconded from Lockenhouse Open Prison in Cavan on October the 4th. He was found cycling in the City West area of Dublin today and was eventually arrested after a major Garda operation. The 53-year-old has been transferred back to prison custody and will now serve time in a closed jail. 7:02.
News Talk weather.
Thanks to Ryanair. Visit family and friends this Christmas. The lowest fares are now on Ryanair.com.
Tomorrow looks set to be mostly dry day with mist and fog slow to clear from some areas. There'll be a mix of some cloud and bright spells with generally light variable breezes. Maximum temperature is 10 to 12 degrees. Now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors.
This is News Talk.
Yeah, welcome along, folks. Really good show for you this evening. We will talk to Julie DiCaro about Aaron Rodgers, who is now very much at the centre of the anti-vaccination war stateside after his interview on the Pat McAfee show in the last couple of days. Football show after 9, Dan McDonnell and Damien Delaney talking all things Ireland-Portugal. Dan as well on the legacy of Rue Doctor, who heads off into the sunset after 8 years at the helm as Director of Football, Technical Director in the FAI. Robbie Fowler on the show as well. He was part of our Cadbury Road show last week, so we'll play some of that conversation after 8 o'clock. 53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, you are there, I would presume.
I hope so.
You most certainly are. And Ronan Mullen, I can see you are there because you're here in studio. Hello.
Joe, how are things?
You're pushing the Aaron Rodgers story here. So, Aaron Rodgers, a beloved quarterback in the main by lots of people. Yeah.
Like
one of the all-time great quarterbacks.
Oh, for sure. And like talent-wise, possibly his roster or his credentials in terms of what he's put together, trophy cabinet-wise, wouldn't be up there with the Tom Brady's of the world, but raw talent, I think he'd be considered, himself and Patrick Mahomes, who, as an aside, is having a bit of a down year at the moment, would be considered possibly the most talented quarterbacks ever.
Okay.
So he's in that sort of echelon and also has this sort of everyman charm about him, which drew him in the way that Tom Brady never did, where you kind of relate to Aaron Rodgers. He was kind of rough around the edges, you know, talked about some quirky things, and you kind of felt like he wasn't the athlete of the day type mould. He was a little bit freer with his thoughts, which is this is where the Pat McAfee show comes into it, because he does this weekly hit on Tuesdays typically, where they sit down for like 40 minutes and he literally goes into like minute detail on plays. He's got this photographic memory where he can break down, you name a play from a game 7 years ago, and he'd be like, well, what I saw the cornerback doing there was this, and that's why I did that. And it's just absolutely fascinating. Again, the detail you don't get from a current sports person. And then he'll do, like, again, I might be boring people here, but he does the Aaron Rodgers book club where he says, this is the book I'm reading at the moment, and that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit charming, a little bit stupid at times, but that's the vibe of that show, which meant this marriage on Friday where Aaron Rodgers, like his unvaccinated status had leaked earlier in the week. He went on the Pat McAfee show to basically outline why he didn't get vaccinated, and that's the core of the issue, where he was just spouting information, some misinformation, and wasn't sort of qualifying his stance satisfactorily, and the blowback has been substantial as a result of that. So that's why it's in the news. It's the main sports story in America since Friday, really.
Well, Julie DiCaro is going to join us 7:30, chat about it. I think some of the blowback, not all of it for sure, but certainly has centred around the fact that he was asked, because this is obviously a big topic and players are being asked routinely, certainly stateside, about their vaccination status. He was asked at the start of the season, or maybe late last summer, what his situation was, and he said he had been immunised, which was sailing close to the wind. I mean, it turns out he meant homeopathic remedies, and I think willfully, understood people were asking, and as they were talking about the vaccinations, the improved new vaccinations, and he said, well, no, I'm immunised, but left it at that. So that's blown up in his face a little bit. I've just watched 25 minutes of it. It's a 47-minute interview, and you would say he's certainly giving a lot more than a Callum Robinson explanation of "I just haven't." He's clearly, by his own admission, put lots of work into it and lots of research, and I mean, he's talking to Joe Rogan amongst others, and
well then,
so
that's not research, Joe.
There's that, but he mentions all the various people he's spoken to, so he's gone deep on the whole thing, and he's rationalising it in his own mind anyway. But this hasn't washed with people in the majority.
Yeah, like if he went on 60 Minutes, and listen, those news affairs shows in America, they're tilted in a certain way where I'm not often satisfied by the line of questioning either. It does seem like it's a little bit agenda driven. This was just the total opposite though. There was no fact checking. There was no preconceived notion from Pat McAfee. Why would there be? Like, this is just an ex-player who has his friends on. They have the crack. They chat about what games they're going to watch at the weekend. It's not 60 Minutes or something like that. So that was kind of the frustration of it, where he's throwing out what are factually erroneous things, and he's just spreading them on. It's like a TED talk, except it's not being fact checked. That was just my sense of it. Like, when he sets the stall out initially and says he's allergic to certain things, he was advised against taking those. Then the Johnson & Johnson, the mishap with that vaccine, and he decided against it. And he's kind of, for people who, the uninitiated on it, and there's a huge swathes of the population in America and beyond who just don't take an interest in the minutiae of the COVID situation insofar as the vaccine rollout and the discrepancies within it, that kind of thing. So this could be the first they're hearing of it. And if Aaron Rodgers says it, and this is the equivalent of Ronaldo or somebody over here saying it, they're going to take it as gospel. There's a certain cohort of people who will believe what Aaron Rodgers is saying and take it at face value. So that was my main concern with it. But people have taken it particularly to heart. Like, he was equating his struggle with Martin Luther King quotes and laws on abortion in America, and you're just thinking, you just like someone to be maybe reasoning this out with him a little bit. It just felt like a bit of a soliloquy that was going off the rails a little bit, and it's good that he's put his point of view out there and hasn't let it sort of drift into the abyss a little bit. But there were a few harmful things he said, I think, in terms of not just for his own his professional pride, as it were, that he was seen as like a pioneer in how he played the game and that kind of thing, and as I said, relatable, but has lost a lot of that goodwill now, I think.
Okay, well, Julie DeCaro is with us 7:30, senior writer, editor at Deadspin. She can fill us in on, I'd say, an interesting couple of days in Aaron Rodgers' life. So that's on the way. We've Damien Delaney and Dan McDonnell after 9 o'clock, looking ahead to Republic of Ireland against Portugal on Thursday, of which we will have live commentary. Join us from 7 o'clock Thursday evening. Richie, curious, what do you think Stephen Kenny needs to do here to secure contract? Is the kind of burning question, or is that already secured regardless of absolute disaster?
I'd say the decision's already been made. I don't think there's a disaster would be like 6-7 goals conceded and none scored against the Portuguese, and then a defeat maybe as well of any kind of hue against Luxembourg. That's what you're looking in terms of disaster. I don't think that's necessarily what's coming. There's enough to suggest that they can put it up to Portugal. Portugal, as we'll get into in a moment, have their own concerns ahead of Thursday's game, because the real test for them is against Serbia, because they need to win their final match in Lisbon to finish top of the group, and Serbia are currently a point clear, and Portugal are walking the tightrope because they've got 6 players who are going into this game on Thursday with yellow cards, and several of them are fairly frontline players. Joao Cancelo is one of them, Ruben Dias is another, Diogo Jota is another, Renato Sanchez is on that list too. So they've got concerns that they don't want to necessarily give it the beans against Ireland per se on Thursday. So between the Faro performance and the uptick in performance last month, there's enough to suggest we're going to be okay in both of these games. The decision over a contract, I think, in the main, is done. Like, it'd be foolhardy for anybody to base it on 2 games. You got to look at it through the prism of a couple of years, and I think there's enough work done, enough credit in the bank to say that Kenny's getting another deal here.
What do you think, Ronan?
be interesting if a performance on par with the one they did produce in the away game is good enough this time around. I did get the sense that Portugal were somewhat off it in that game, and I know Ronaldo bailed them out of jail ultimately, but Ireland, needless to say, unlucky not to get a result there. That pitch was a disaster over there though, and I get the impression, depending on the team that is picked this week, in terms of the likes of Bernardo Silva, Bruno Fernandes, these guys' intricate passing on that Aviva surface, it could get away from Ireland quite quickly. But if the level of performance has improved, I think there was an overemphasis on that early in the Kenny reign, that we were talking about performances over results, but the performances weren't there either.
No.
Now there is a sense that we are playing well and the results are now like incrementally beginning to follow, and that's all we want. Nobody's expecting Ireland to beat Portugal, but if they can put in a performance on par with that one that they did in the away tie, or above ideally, that would be great, and then close obviously strongly in the final game of the group.
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's such an interesting couple of days if you think of what's happening at the Aviva Stadium. So you've two new international coaches who came on board, and there was such an emphasis on what kind of style are you going to implement. You know, we need to change styles was very much the thing aimed at both coaches. Pandemic first year, no crowds, and very iffy first years, and jury out first years, and question marks over Andy Farrell across the Six Nations in advance of the England game, questions over Stephen Kenny really up until, you would have to say, the most recent international window was a real moment, I think, for a lot of people of, okay, and maybe the Serbia game as well, to be fair, a moment where a lot of people said, okay, this thing is starting to move now in the right direction. And now here they are on the upswing for the first time in front of capacity crowds with real tests in New Zealand and Portugal, and then even Luxembourg away is a test of its own kind. And so much is going to be decided, you know, and it's suddenly all here. And well, I can't think of a double header at the Aviva Stadium in a long time between New Zealand and then Portugal in the World Cup qualifier in the football. I don't know when you're going back to. And, you know, so much on the line for both coaches. I mean, this time next week, Richie, so much will be decided over the next couple of days. I mean, it's fun. It's great.
Yeah, at least we're getting in before the Saturday game in terms of the soccer, because that pitch will, I'd imagine, if the rains continue to come this week, and I think they're promised for the weekend as well, that pitch could chew up pretty badly. So if the fixtures were reversed and the Portugal game was after the Luxembourg one, then we could be in real trouble. But yeah, like it's a cracking week. Like and people who look after the Aviva Stadium and the FAI and the IRFU really couldn't wish for a better week to come along when things have finally been able to open up. And I know the numbers you would have heard there in the news would be a concern for some people, but in terms of being able to get 100,000 people through the gates of that stadium inside the space of 3 days is just such a boon for everybody who works in the association. We're not just talking about the Philip Browns and the Jonathan Hills in this world. We're talking about people who are, you know, at the lower end in those companies and looking to preserve their jobs and pay the bills and get a Christmas on the table. It's great. And it's going to be such a buzz around town as well, both of the games. There mightn't be any travelling supporters, but we don't necessarily need them, because I think there's going to be enough excitement generated by anybody and everybody who's going to get to go to a full Aviva Stadium for the first time in 2 years. Like, that's where we are. Like, it was November 19, obviously, that the last time the Aviva was full, I think, for an Ireland international. Like, it's going to be such... We got a taste of it, I guess, against Qatar, but it's going to be such an alien thing to have that roar be elevated to such a degree against one of the best sides in the world. It's going to be an occasion, and it's going to be an occasion, I guess, times two. We throw in the All Blacks game.
Fast forward to Saturday, Portugal 3-1 winners, All Blacks win by 20. We're all thinking, ooh. So, well, let's see. It's the beauty of sport, isn't it? So we should start the news round. It is, as ever, with thanks to Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors. In the world of golf, well, the European Tour approaching its 50th anniversary. I think it's 50 years old next year.
Yeah,
the European Tour is no more, or certainly the name is no more.
Yeah, the news today, as part of this rebadging, as Mr. Partridge would call it, the Irish Open is going to be staged at Mount Juliet for the second consecutive year. It's the first time in a decade that the Irish Open has gone back-to-back at the same course. The Kilkenny course was confirmed as the venue for the competition, which will run next year from June 30th to July 3rd. However, the Irish Open hasn't been added to the lucrative Rolex series. Confirmation of the date and venue came on the same day as you mentioned there. The European Tour rebranded as the DP World Tour. It'll see 47 tournaments played across 27 different territories, among them new gigs in the likes of Belgium and the UAE.
If this is the first you've heard of the DP World Tour, then you could make the same mistake I made when I saw this unveiling earlier on and think to my...
Don't Google DP, Joe.
No, but I was like, my God, DP World Tour, this is a riposte to the Saudis' effort, and this is a completely new tour, and it's a PGA Tour, European Tour combination. It's a world tour. And then it turns out the company is called DP World. So it's just unfortunate that it has world in the title, so it makes it sound like it's a world tour, but it's just DP World Tour. It's like the European Tour being called the Emirates Tour.
I'd imagine there's going to be a further aligning, because they obviously talked about this strategic partnership between the PGA Tour and the European Tour. This is going to bring it further along that road, whereby we're just going to have, this. I'd imagine this is probably just going to be a temporary thing, and we're going to have a one branded tour somewhere along the line with different stratas, the same way we might see in the US, like the PGA and the Corn Ferry, and over here,
potentially
the Challenger Tour, etc.
I think, the PGA Tour may well just buy the DP World Tour. It's going to take a while to get used to that. The European Tour is where we're headed. There were a couple of, I think, 3 co-sanctioned events, so certainly they're moving together in a certain direction. This does, from a European Tour perspective, I was reading about it, it injects a bit of cash, so the minimum prize money per tournament now will be 2 million a tournament, whereas there were a huge number of events this year in particular. The European Tour quite badly hit by COVID, where it was 1 million, less than 1 million in some cases, which that's to go around all the players. So you compare that with PGA Tour, where the prize fund for basically every tournament is at least $7-8 million. Winner gets $1 million. So it really was struggling. So they've upped the money slightly, but it's still... Look, I think the truth is the European Tour, now the DP World Tour, is still a tour which has been hit badly by COVID and is struggling. So we'll see. There's lots of changes afoot in golf. The whole thing's going to transform over the next couple of years, I think. We'll talk about that on Golf Weekly, Richie. I know you'll be listening on Thursday. We'll get into all that.
Happy subscriber, Joe. Friend of the pod.
There you go.
MLB baseball fans might get in touch to corroborate this, but I'm fairly sure...
The only MLB fan I know in the whole of Ireland is Billy Joe Padden.
Billy Joe Padden?
Yeah.
Oh, well, if Billy Joe's listening, he will definitely know this. But I think there was a sponsorship affiliation. So the World Series is called the World Series, the ultimate championship of the MLB. But I think it was something to do with a sponsorship thing, that the New York World Telegram Service or something sponsored the initial games. And that's where World Series came from, because people tend to snipe and say it's not a World Series, it's only American teams playing. But someone might be able to double check that, but I think that is true.
Now, I remember Billy Joe saying, he pays the subscription fee to get all the games on his phone. He'll watch the highlights. He's a man who knows his stuff.
I find it pretty dull. I've gone to two games in America, and it's definitely more of a social event than a sporting occasion. I'd say people in the stadiums are watching perhaps 30% of the action.
Yeah.
And the other 70% just talking to each other.
It's just a drinking day, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like the cricket.
Yeah.
It is a bit like that, yeah. I'd be more for the basketball, hockey. And then American football is what it is. I think people appreciate.
Sure.
It's kind of high octane bursts rather than any sustained action, but it's high level chess, Joe. Physical chess.
Well, indeed. So the referee story we mentioned last night, Richie, a bunch of underage games not happening this weekend because the referees have said we're tired of all the abuse, and so games have been cancelled on the back of their walkout or their protest, in effect.
Yeah, and the FAI responded late last night to that mass walkout of referees this weekend. The NDSL, Eastern Women's Football League and the Metro Girls League suspended all matches for the coming weekend following the constant abuse sustained by their officials. The FAI say any abuse will not be tolerated and will indeed be punished.
Right. What does that mean, though? It's not much of a response.
They're going to take action, basically. They're going to have to get a firmer hold on the games that essentially do happen under their jurisdiction. But this brings to mind the fractured nature of Irish football, where essentially so much of the youth program, schoolboys, and amateur game is more or less, for front of a better phrase, sublet to these organisations, whereby that wouldn't really happen under any other fully normally functioning footballing entity.
Be curious to know. So, like, say a referee is getting terrible verbal abuse. Can they put that in their match report and it's investigated, sorted out, and the parent or coach handing out the abuse is identified subsequently and then punished? Is that how it happens? Because it's not like there's cameras here to pick out people.
Yeah, I'd imagine they'd be putting in match reports, but how are you going to identify some randomer that you don't know, mightn't see again?
Yeah,
and doesn't have any affiliation to the game. So essentially, can't be punished for turning up to a public park. It's a minefield of awfulness. It's just depending on people to have a bit of cop on and a bit of empathy for their fellow humans, because it's just people being dickheads essentially has forced this.
Whoa, language, my friend. Come on now. Kids in the car. Wow. Come on. You're a father, for God's sake. So Anthony Eddy, he gave an interview, IRFU Director of Women's and Sevens Rugby, and it's been roundly criticised, I think, by a bunch of former internationals, current internationals as well.
Yeah, the Director of Women's and Sevens Rugby in the IRFU has come in for a torrent of criticism from former and current internationals. Anthony Eddy claimed it was wrong to suggest that the women's 15s game had been neglected, and say they were well prepared for their unsuccessful World Cup qualifier. Current Ireland hooker Cliona Maloney has been among those to fire back at Eddy. Ex-Ireland centre Jenny Murphy described Eddy's comments as spineless, and the former Ireland captain Claire Molloy wondered where is the accountability. Last month, the RFU announced a wide-ranging review into the women's game, fronted by the former Wales international Amanda Bennett.
Yeah, we mentioned that review, which is happening on Wednesday Night Rugby with Keith Wood and Fiona Hayes, and they both welcomed it. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of teeth this review has. Amanda Bennett is overseeing it, and she seems to have very good credentials on a whole host of fronts when it comes to sport and women's sport as well. So that will be interesting. But I think, Ronan, it's safe to say very few people seem happy with the job the RFU are doing when it comes to women's rugby over the last number of years at this stage.
Yeah, and the flashpoints from this year in particular have brought it back to the forefront. But as you touched on there, it's a pre-existing issue, a long-standing one, and it's just almost monthly these things resurface and get brought back to the fore. But the 7s, 15s dynamic is interesting. We probably don't have the playing population at men's or women's level to serve both masters in terms of a league competition, whereas you don't see it in other top tier countries where players are segueing from either code all that often and with great success. So it is probably something we probably have to choose our pathway in that regard at this point.
Don O'Sullivan in Limerick says, Ronan, 100% correct on the World Series. Great knowledge, he says.
There you go.
Billy Joe Padden nodding along. Impressed with you.
Well, I won't take it fully as a compliment until I get it from Billy Joe.
Get Billy Joe on the phone. Brian in Kildare, who says he's a self-appointed spoil sport. Excuse me. You really are, Brian, by the way. He says, lads, with the greatest of respect, in fairness, respect has been noted.
That's always a good start.
What will the fallout be after these games? Neither manager's in trouble. Neither match actually has any stakes. It'll be nice to have full crowds, but let's not build it up to anything bigger than it is. I think beating the All Blacks in front of a full crowd. Brian, you know yourself. You know the deal. Rugby doesn't do friendlies, so those are the stakes. It's a test match against New Zealand. I mean, it's not the World Cup, but there are stakes. And Andy Farrell's at an interesting point, isn't he, in his tenure? And then on Stephen Kenny, well, again, there haven't been stakes for some time in this group because we were out so early, but the stakes are big there as well. The stakes are obvious. He's got a contract he wants to win for the Euros. So with the greatest of respect, Brian, ... So Aaron Smith then, he's going to be there on Saturday.
He is, yeah. He's been drafted into the All Black squad ahead of Saturday's test with Ireland, the 32-year-old replacing Brad Weber, who has suffered a head injury. Ireland ran out victorious when the sides met at the Aviva last in 2018, but were heavily beaten at the World Cup the following year by New Zealand. And Captain Jonathan Sexton says that defeat in Tokyo still rankles.
Well, like that's just the way the game unfolded on Saturday. Like we've always had the license to do that, you know what I mean? But if teams show a different picture, like you can't do that all the time. We'd love to do it all the time, and we just got presented the pictures and we read them quite well and executed off the back of it. But you know, if a team comes with and they put 14 guys in the front line, you know, you can't run it. You gotta kick more, or you gotta, target different space. So. In an ideal world, yes, but if it comes and it's raining or the conditions are really bad and they play a different type of defence to what Japan showed us, well then we'll play the right options that we see fit. The most important thing is that we win, and that's what we're judged on. And it's great getting some plaudits for how we played the game on Saturday. We showed bits of that through the Six Nations, but I think what's the pleasing part about it was that it was a bit more consistent this week. But again, I think Japan even said themselves they were not too happy with what they put up on the day. So we'll be playing against much better opposition this week, I think.
Well, we sure will. Richie, I'm going to jump in here in your news round and mention Bernardo Silva fitness doubts ahead of the game on Thursday, missed training today, and Paul Pogba is out for 8 to 10 weeks. So until 2022, really. It was just in striking a ball at training. I saw a video of it and he just pulled up straight away with a muscle injury, thigh injury. But the reason I'm jumping across those two very quickly is because we should mention this Jim McGuinness story, which I think has caught the eye.
Yeah, he's been lined up as part of a prospective coaching ticket with the Down senior footballers. The All-Ireland winning manager with Donegal will be a coach, it seems, under Conor Laverty, who is a front-runner to replace Paddy Talley. Laverty's been in charge of the Down under-20s and was ratified, in fact, to continue on next year, but it looks like he's taking a step up and will take fellow under-20 coach Marty Clark, the 2010 All-Star, into the senior setup as well. Last month, saw McGuinness lead Derry City's under-19 soccer players to the Enda McGill Cup with a penalties victory over Bohemians.
Ronan, Mullen, you've been working this story today, making a few phone calls. So Jim McGuinness, I hadn't fully appreciated this, is currently coaching the Derry City under-19s. Derry City now a well-funded club. There's money there at that club. Jim McGuinness, part of the overall setup. So Jim McGuinness is with the under-19s. And now it seems Conor Laverty and Marty Clark are bidding to take over at Down, replacing Paddy Talley. And they have Jim McGuinness included on their ticket. This doesn't seem to be just Jim McGuinness will do 3 sessions across the year kind of a thing, like he helped out with the Galway footballers that time. This seems to be McGuinness named as part of their ticket.
Yeah, that's certainly the suggestion anyway, and the formal nature of that, if it's submitted as such and ratified before the board with his name on it, they'd want to be expecting, and I'm sure questions are being asked to this end, that he's having a substantive role in the team. Otherwise, why are we signing off on this trio? But I think most Down fans would be happy with the Laverty-Clark combo, given what they've done, both reputable names within the county and the underage success speaks for itself. We were chatting off air earlier. This isn't necessarily like when McGuinness went to Donegal as the main man, and I think we can see now in retrospect the talent was there in abundance, and it was just a matter of formulating the right plan and getting them jiving in the correct manner. And you know, we all saw what followed. It wasn't just the All-Ireland win, it was sustained success over a couple of years. So it's not quite like that in Down. There are sort of issues to be resolved there, maybe expanding the panel by getting more buy-in from Kilcoo, for example, who typically wouldn't, their best players wouldn't tug out for the intercounty team necessarily. There is a little bit of club first mentality there for some reason. So Conor Laverty is involved with that team.
That's worth a piece some night all on its own, the Kilcoo situation.
Some of the county politics, I'm amazed by it. Like I was in Galway for a few years. I didn't quite understand the extent to which there's little dynamics at play there. Louth is just sort of we just whatever 15 players will play, we'll just get them out there. And then like often when counties get it to click, like when Armagh did at the turn of this century and got the full buy-in, that's when these counties can actually compete. And that's all you want from Down point of view, presumably, is that they're fielding the best panel they possibly can. And with McGuinness and Clark and Laverty as figureheads, you can't ask for much better than that in terms of a prospect.
I would be thinking, well, I'll turn up and see what this McGuinness fella has to say.
Yeah.
So very interesting. That would be box office. So any updates, we'll bring them to you accordingly. Richie McCormack, I will chat to you tomorrow. Cheers.
Nice one.
Ronan Mullen back with us later on across the show. Competition time now.
Your chance to win big. News Talk's cash machine.
So we've had another winner in the News Talk cash machine. Congratulations to John Murphy. Knew the correct amount today was €5,298.21 to be exact. And when he was called just after 3 o'clock today, he had his answer ready. So we'll be topping up the cash machine tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Make sure you're listening to News Talk Breakfast and you can find out how much you could win. Back in a sec.
The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, proud sponsors of Movember. Gentlemen, start your razors.
There's a new day coming. Air Business and Evros Technology Group have come together to form Air Evo, Ireland's #1 telecommunications and ICT solutions provider, and the first of its kind to redefine what's possible, making true end-to-end solutions possible for the first time in Ireland through innovation, expertise, and a unique connection between technology and people, so that you can innovate, evolve, and grow your business. Air Evo. Together we make possible. Find out more at airevo.ie.
Eurocycles Euro Baby. Come on down, lads. The crack is mighty. The Eurocycles Euro Baby prices can't be bet. For bicycles and things with wheels and lots for babies, yeah.
At EurocyclesEurobaby.com, Eurocycles Euro Baby Long Mile Road and Airside Swords. Check out the massive range of electric bikes, prams, push chairs and more.
The Eurocycles